The twin suns of Zeus hung low in the scorched sky, one a cold white flare and the other a smoldering orange ember, casting jagged shadows across the broken land. The heat shimmered in waves, rising off the iron-rich ridge where Manfred lay prone. The butt of his long-range rifle pressed to his shoulder, the scope trained on the basin below. His breath was still, measured. Like the land around him, he waited, unmoving. Not because he wanted to, but because years of habit had trained his bones to obey the discipline of patience. This was supposed to be clean. A downed freighter, a quick salvage job. In and out before the local authorities locked the system down. He didn't care what brought the ship down or who owned it. He just wanted the nav core. High grade, compact, valuable. He had no interest in trouble, not anymore. That life was behind him. Left buried under the flags and funerals and medals that meant nothing. Now but trouble didn't care what he wanted. The scope's lens shimmered, drawing his eye to movement far below. The basin was a mess of scorched rock and shattered debris. But it wasn't the wreckage that pulled his attention. It was the bodies scattered like broken puppets, limbs twisted unnaturally, armor splintered, weapons flung wide. Half a dozen of them, at least, hunters, maybe mercs. But they weren't just dead. They'd been torn apart. And at the center of it all was her dot chained to a black slab of stone. The girl or creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. Thick violet fur shimmered with an unnatural sheen under the glare of the twin suns, clinging to a body shaped with both power and grace. A tail, long and muscled, coiled behind her. Her head was bowed, shoulders slack. But even from this distance, he saw the tension in her limbs. The raw fury coiled beneath the exhaustion. Then she looked up. Blue eyes, glowing, searing into his lens. His finger twitched on the trigger, instinct whispering that she was dangerous. But something stopped him, not fear. Something else. Manfred scanned the scene again. Deep gouges tore through the earth around the basin. Ancient trees splintered and uprooted. Something massive had come through here, something that didn't kill like a weapon but like a force of nature. And whatever it wasn't far. The trail of ruin led down into the valley beyond, into the dense, shadow-choked forest. And in that darkness something moved, slow, deliberate, a shape too big for the trees it brushed aside. Gray hide, ridged spine. The legend made flesh. Ridgeback. Titan. They had tried to bait it, and she had been the lure. His breath caught as a low whimper reached his ears, barely audible over the whisper of wind. The sound didn't come from the trees or the dead. It came from her. He shifted, adjusted the scope. Her head was down again, trembling, not from cold but from whatever. Strength had left her. Walk away. That was the voice in his head. The voice that had kept him alive long after the galaxy stopped caring. Walk away. Take the core. Leave the mess. Forget her. But the whimper came again. It didn't sound like a monster. It sounded like someone who had been broken. And was still trying not to be. He sighed, low and ragged, and slung his rifle across his back. The climb down was steep, the rock loose beneath his boots. Every step brought him closer to the stench of blood and scorched metal, closer to her. And when he finally stepped into the basin, she heard him. Her head snapped up. She lunged. The chains snapped taut with a clatter of iron and stone, her snarl cutting the air like a blade. Fangs bared, muscles straining, eyes blazing. He froze, hands raised, palms open. I'm not here to hurt you, he said, knowing she wouldn't understand. Not the words, but maybe the tone. Maybe the silence in between. She didn't lunge again. But she didn't relax. He stepped sideways, slow and careful, eyes never leaving hers. The shackle on her wrist was crude, thick iron and simple mechanics. He could cut it if he wanted to risk the sound. Or he could find something else. He moved to the wreckage, scanning the field. There, a broken slab of granite, sharp on one end. Heavy. He brought it back, lifting it high. Her growl rose in her throat. Just the chain, he said. He slammed the rock down. The sound was deafening. The echo cracked across the ridge. They froze. A distant roar answered. Not a warning. Not a challenge. Rage. He hit the chain again. A spark flew, and a sliver of iron sliced his cheek. Blood ran down, warm and sharp. He didn't stop. He kept striking. And then, with a final crash, the chain split. She stumbled forward, free but unsteady. He caught her, her eyes locked on his bleeding cheek. The growl died in her throat. She didn't speak, but something in her gaze shifted. Not anger, not fear. Wonder. The ground was still trembling. Dust drifted lazily from the shattered stone slab behind them, falling like ash through the sharp beams of twin sunlight slanting into the narrow crevice. Manfred crouched low beside the alien girl Jane, though. He didn't know her name yet, his back pressed tight to the stone as the air pulsed with the fading shockwave of the Titan's rampage. Above them, the ridgeback's massive footfalls pounded across the basin, each step sending gritty vibrations through the rock into Manfred's bones. Jane didn't speak, didn't move, but every inch of her was alive with tension. Her ears flattened against her skull, nostrils flaring, her tail coiled protectively around her thigh. The scent of blood and scorched metal clung to her fur, mixing with the primal musk of fear and adrenaline. Manfred adjusted his weight slightly, feeling the hard edge of the crevice dig into his spine. The space was barely wide enough for one of them, and yet they were pressed together, shoulder to shoulder, thigh to thigh. Her breathing was shallow and fast, every exhale brushing warm across his cheek. Then came the sound that froze them both. Snort. Deep. Too close. A long inhalation. As if the Titan were tasting the air, searching for the scent of something familiar prey. Manfred dared not breathe. Jane pressed a clawed hand against the stone wall. Her eyes were glowing faintly in the gloom, twin embers of pale blue locked on the narrow slit of light above them. She wasn't just watching, she was listening. Not like he did, with ears and training, but with something deeper, instinctual, ancestral. Outside, the Titan's bulk cast a sudden shadow across their narrow entrance, blotting out the light. The temperature dropped instantly. Silence fell dense and suffocating. Manfred's fingers crept slowly toward the medkit strapped to his belt, not to draw it, but to steady his shaking hand. He had survived ambush, corporate assassins, and the razor jungles of Istrin. He had never been this afraid. Jane twitched beside him. A rumble overhead. Another snort. Then, slowly, the pressure of the presence outside began to recede. One step. Then another. The shadow drifted away like a dying storm cloud. Manfred exhaled slowly, letting his head fall back against the rock. They were still alive. Barely. Jane's single quotes as gaze shifted to him. For a moment, they just stared. He saw the dried blood crusting the matted fur at her wrists, the raw bruises beneath. But it wasn't the wounds that struck him, it was the way she looked at him. Like he was a creature she didn't understand. Like he was something unexpected. He gestured slowly, pointing at her arms. Then, at his medkit, she flinched when he moved it toward her. His hands froze. She bared her fangs. Not a threat, an instinct, a memory. Whatever had chained her had hurt her. Whatever tools they had used were burned into her mind. He didn't speak. Just placed the medkit on the rock between them. Slowly, respectfully. Then he reached up, touched the cut on his cheek, pointed at her wrists. A wordless offer. Care, not harm. She blinked. Seconds passed. Then, with agonizing hesitation, she extended one arm. Her claws retracted. Her hand trembled. Manfred worked quickly, his fingers gentle despite their size. Antiseptic hissed as it touched. Raw skin. She jerked. Hissed Dot but didn't pull away. He wrapped her wrists with clean synth bandages. When he was done, she didn't thank him. Didn't nod. Didn't gesture. She simply relaxed. A sliver. A breath. The silence between them shifted, thickened into something that wasn't trust but wasn't fear. Either. Outside, the light shifted. The white sun dimming as the orange deepened. Time was passing. They couldn't stay. Here. Jane suddenly turned, her nose twitching. She pressed one hand to the rear wall of the crevice, her brow furrowing. Then she pointed. Manfred followed her gesture. There was nothing but darkness until she made a walking motion with her fingers. Pointed again. A tunnel. He blinked. He hadn't seen it. Wouldn't have? But she had. He retrieved a glow rod from his belt, cracking it and casting a soft green light through the gloom. The tunnel sloped downward, narrow, jagged, but navigable. She started forward. He followed. The stones swallowed them. They moved in silence through the ancient heart of the ridge, the glow rod flickering across walls marked with strange mineral veins and the glint of buried metal. The air grew cooler, heavier. The sound of the world outside faded, replaced by the drip of unseen water and the crunch of rock beneath their feet. Jane moved like she belonged there. Her steps soft, her body coiled like a predator, always listening, always ready. Manfred was slower, heavier, but his eyes scanned the ceiling. His mind ran calculations. Tunnel integrity, stress points. If something collapsed, where could they run? He didn't trust the silence, but it was better than being on the surface with the tightened. The tunnel twisted, branched, descended. Hours passed. Maybe more. Eventually, the air grew warmer. Then they saw it, a sliver of light. They emerged on a high mesa, the sun's low and bleeding into the sky. And there, not half a kilometer away, was Salvation. The hunter ship. Manfred stared. So did Jane. Then they ran. The air tore with plasma. The first bolt screamed past Manfred's ear before his boots even touched solid ground. He barely had time to register the crackle of scorched ozone before another shot punched into the rock beside them, showering him. And Jane with molten fragments. They dove behind a jagged outcropping just short of the transport's loading ramp, panting, coughing. The illusion of salvation shattered into a storm of fire. Ahead, cresting a nearby dune, 4 figures in scorched hunter armor moved with grim efficiency. Survivors, returning from a long-range patrol. Plasma rifles leveled, sights trained. Their prize was trying to flee. Their bait was running. And they were not about to let go. Manfred's fingers clenched around his rifle. His heart hammered like a drum against his ribs, not from fear, but from the bitter taste of fury. Ambush, he muttered. Should have expected it. Jane pressed close beside him, her chest heaving, her blue eyes burning with frustration and rage. Her tail lashed behind her, twitching like a live wire. Her muscles tensed, ready, waiting. Another bolt smashed into their cover, blasting a chunk of stone into dust. They were pinned. You flank. You die, Manfred muttered, eyes flicking over the terrain. Too open, too exposed. Can't split, can't outgun. Jane let out a low, guttural growl, not at him but at the situation. Then she did something Manfred hadn't expected. She placed her clawed hand gently on his arm. Not to stop him. Not to warn him. To steady him. His breath caught. And then she moved. The moment she exploded from cover, the battlefield changed. She was a blur of violet and fury. Her body curved through the air in a low, feral sprint, bounding forward on all fours before launching herself high with an impossible leap. Plasma bolts seared through the space she'd just vacated. The nearest hunter barely had time to scream. She landed on him with crushing force, claws flashing, her strike surgically precise. She didn't kill, she crippled. His weapon arm shattered beneath her blow. His rifle spun out of his grasp, and he dropped with a howl of agony. Manfred saw his opening dot. He rose. Rifle to his shoulder. Exhale. Fire. A kinetic slug punched clean through the helmet of the second hunter. The body dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. The other two scrambled for cover. Too late. Jane was already moving again.
Vaulting.
Over a boulder, her claws catching the shoulder of the third merc and sending him crashing to the ground with a crunch of bone and armor. The fourth panicked, turned his weapon toward her, but Manfred's second shot knocked him flat, the impact slamming him against the dune with a wet, thudding crack. In less than 30 seconds, the battlefield was silent. Manfred blinked, slowly lowered his rifle. The wind howled. Jane stood in the center of it all, chest rising and falling, her body slick with sweat and blood, not hers. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she didn't look like a beast. She looked like a warrior. He sprinted to her, sighed without a word, grabbing her wrist, pulling her toward the ramp. They bolted into the ship's dark interior, the doors slamming shut behind them with a metallic groan. Alarms lit the cockpit. Low fuel. Damaged systems. Minimal shields. No matter. Manfred dropped into the pilot's chair, fingers flying across the console. He'd flown 100 rigs like this, ugly, practical, fast when it needed to be. The engines coughed, shuddered, and roared to life beneath them. Jane stood beside him, hands gripping the bulkhead as the ship lifted with a violent lurch. They tore free of the planet's gravity, the red dust of Zeos vanishing beneath them. The stars stretched ahead, cold, infinite, free, until the console beeped. Manfred looked down. Ship logs, encrypted, protected, flashing with red priority tags. Curious, he tapped into the nav core, bypassed the security with a practiced flick of his fingers. What he found made his blood run cold. The logs weren't about salvaging the Ridgeback Titan. They were about her. Specimen L female lyani. High psionic potential. Elevated pheromone signature perfect for baiting apex predators. Expendable. The word hit him like a punch to the chest. Expendable. Jane stood behind him, watching him read. He turned slowly, showed her the screen. She stared at it, then looked at him. Her face was unreadable. He didn't know what to say. He wanted to say sorry. He wanted to scream. Instead, he whispered, "You were never the target." Her claws flexed. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't rage. She didn't growl. Instead, she reached forward and gently touched the cut on his cheek, the one he'd gotten. When freeing her. Then she stepped back and collapsed. Manfred caught her before she hit the deck, her body limp and burning hot. Plasma burns, he realized. The bolt from the ambush. It had hit her shoulder. Damn it, he muttered, lifting her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, but solid, strong. He carried her to the medbay, his jaw clenched. He worked in silence, applying dermal Reagan patches, stabilizing her vitals. Her breath came in shallow gasps, unconscious, but alive. And then he sat beside her, in the hum of the dark, humming ship. Alone. With the knowledge that she wasn't just bait. She was the secret they'd tried to keep buried. And now they were both fugitives. He didn't know what came next, but as he looked at her sleeping form, he knew one thing: he would not leave her behind. The hum of the stolen transport was steady now, deep and low, like the calm before a coming storm. The ship drifted through open space, systems stable for the moment, engines humming with exhausted defiance. And in the medical bay, Manfred sat, motionless, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the unconscious form of the alien girl laid out before him. Jane's chest rose and fell in shallow, rhythmic movements. Her shoulder was wrapped in regenerative mesh, still oozing a slow trickle of dark blood that stained the edges of the biofoam. Her violet fur shimmered under the dim medical lights, and her ears twitched occasionally, as if in response to dreams only she could hear. Manfred had been in this room before, not this ship. But this room. The same lights. The same sterile hum. The same helpless feeling in his gut as someone bled out in front of him. Back then it had been squad mates. Men and women he'd served beside. People who believed in something. Until there were numbers, casualties, strategic losses, his hand hovered above hers. Didn't touch. Couldn't. Not yet. He wasn't used to carrying. Not anymore. You're not even human. He whispered aloud, voice low and brittle. So why the hell do I care? He looked away, stood, paced the tight confines of the medbay. It wasn't the plasma burn that haunted him. It was the sound she'd made when she fell. Not a scream. Not pain. Something else. Fear. Not for herself. For him. He stopped in front of the diagnostic panel, ran another scan of her vitals. Stable. Barely. But stable. The machine beeped. And then something strange happened. He felt it, not heard. Not saw. Felt. Pressure. Like a wave of heat through his skull. A sudden cold memory that wasn't his own. The smell of rust. The weight of chains. Panic clawing at his lungs. Something ancient and wild crashing through the trees. The sound of boots. The scent of fire. He stumbled back, hand catching the edge of the table. It stopped. Just as fast as it came. He looked at her. Her face was still, but behind her closed eyes, something shifted. Her brows furrowed slightly. Her jaw clenched just once. That wasn't me. He muttered. And he realized what it meant. She was dreaming. And somehow he had felt it. The implications hit him like a freight hauler. Her species, the lyani, weren't just wild apex predators. They were psychic, not in the fortune-teller carnival way, but deep, biological telepaths, sentience wrapped in instinct. And something in their bond, whatever it was growing stronger. He returned to her side, sat again, leaned closer. And this time, when the next wave hit, he didn't flinch. He let it in. It wasn't a thought. Not exactly. It was emotion. Raw and pure and tangled like wires in flame. He felt her fear again, trapped, caged, beaten, alone. The sick stench of burning fur. The hopeless weight of captivity. Then bright and wild freedom. The sky. The rush of wind. And the moment he broke her chains. Her memory of him. He felt her awe. Her disbelief. Her hope. His breath caught. Jane. He whispered. Her ears twitched. He closed his eyes and saw a forest, not like any he'd ever known. The trees were silver, leaves like mirrors. And a pack-huge, graceful lyani ran beside her, glowing under starlight, their paws silent on the moss. She was happy, whole, wild. She turned and looked at him, not the man sitting by her. Bed. Him. Running beside her. Part of the pack. The vision shattered like glass. He gasped, staggered back again, heart hammering in his chest. This wasn't just psychic bleed. This was something deeper. A bond. Her unconscious mind was reaching out to him, not out of control. Not random. On purpose. And then her eyes opened. Slowly, blinking against the light. They locked onto his. There was no fear in them. Only recognition. He opened his mouth, but he didn't need to speak. She reached out, not with her hand, but with her mind. A torrent surged between them. Images, feelings, compressed knowledge that defied logic and language. And in a split second, everything he'd suspected became terrifyingly real. He saw the Cathar expanse, not empty, not dead. It pulsed with hidden stars. a cloaked nebula, and at its center, a single living system, a world called Shari. Her home dot and the truth dot, the lyani, were not primitives. They were ancient, advanced, a civilization older than most human history, masters of living bioarchitecture and mind-linked starships. They had remained hidden for centuries, watching the galaxy descend into corporate chaos and war. She had been a scout, on a quiet mission of exploration. Until the crash, and then, the Hunters. Xenocorp hadn't just wanted the Titan. They wanted her. Her genetic signature was rare, even among lyani. Hybrid markers, dormant code, psychic potential beyond anything they'd seen. She was the key to something else, something they feared, something they wanted to control, and she had seen all this, lived it, endured it, and still reached out to him. The connection faded, slow and soft like a tide pulling back from the shore. He blinked. She smiled. Then spoke. For the first time, voice low and melodic, shaped around human words. You stayed. He nodded. Yeah, I did. She closed her eyes again, letting out a slow, weary breath, and Manfred sat there, hand finally closing around hers, as the stars outside continued to burn. Stars twisted outside the viewport like ribbons of molten silver, their strange warps and bends rippling across the hull as the stolen transport broke through another fold of hyperspace. The engines groaned in protest, lights flickered, and Manfred leaned over the console, his jaw clenched, his blood still running hot with adrenaline. Each jump was reckless, dirty, uncalculated, but it was working. No trackers had caught up. No missiles had locked on. Not yet. Behind him, the ship was quiet. Jane was resting in the medbay, her vitals stable, her psychic presence muted for now. But the memory of her voice still rang in his ears. You stayed. He had no answer for it. Not one he could explain. He wasn't the staying kind. Not since Keldra V. Not since his squad was left to die while corporate overlords pulled their funding mid-operation and called it a write-off. That had been the final nail. The moment he decided the galaxy didn't deserve loyalty. Just survival. But Jane had shattered that wall with a glance. And now they were both running through the void, carrying stolen data and a truth that could ignite war. He turned back to the console, accessed the encrypted logs they'd pulled from the Hunter ship, the ones tagged Xenocorp Specimen Control. He cracked them open. And the pieces began to fall into place. Project Apex. Xenocorp's black budget initiative to capture, enhance, and weaponize apex species across known space. The Ridgeback Titan was just one variable, a hammer, a siege beast, mindless, unstoppable. But Jane, she was the scalpel. She wasn't just bait. She was the objective, and the logs were clear. Her DNA, specifically the hybrid encoding buried deep within her neural lattice, contained sequences tied to something far older than the lyani. Something ancient. Something pre-synthetic. A precursor genome. Xenocorp didn't want to study it. They wanted to replicate it, manufacture psychic soldiers, mind-linked assassins, weaponized loyalty. Manfred leaned back in the chair, his stomach churning. If the wrong people saw this, if this data hit the black markets, it would trigger an arms race the likes of which the galaxy had never seen. Entire worlds enslaved through neural resonance. Planetary governors replaced by psychically bound thralls. And Jane, she would be the prototype. You weren't supposed to survive. He muttered aloud. But she had, and now they had to decide what to do with that impossible truth. The ship's proximity alarms suddenly flared, yanking him from his thoughts. He lunged for the controls, heart leaping into his throat. A vessel had dropped out of Eftol directly in their path. Massive, angular, sharp-edged, like a dagger pointed at the heart of space. Xenocorp insignias glowed on its hull like fresh scars. Manfred's fingers danced over the console. Shields 27%. Weapons offline. Escape vector blocked. No way out. Damn it. The CUM system crackled. A voice. Calm, cold, synthetic, unauthorized vessel. You are in violation of Xenocorp asset containment protocols. You will power down and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination. Manfred didn't respond. He turned slowly as the medbay door hissed open. Jane stood there. Not dressed, not armored. Just alive. Her wound was still healing, her fur matted, her steps slow, but her eyes were fire. They're here, she said softly. He nodded. We can't outrun them. He told her. She didn't argue. Instead, she moved to the co-pilot's seat, her hands curling around the console, her claws tapping. Then we don't run. The ship shook. Xenocorp was powering weapons, charging coils, preparing to fire. Manfred watched her. Something was different, not just her posture. Air itself had changed. Denser, charged, as if something unseen had awakened. Jane closed her eyes. And the lights dimmed. The ship hummed with a new vibration, a pulse that had nothing to do with machines. Manfred felt it first in his teeth, a buzz, then in his chest. Like a second heartbeat. The space outside the viewport twisted. Not like hyperspace. This was different. Something ancient and wrong and perfect. Rupture opened in the void. Not from the Xenocruiser. But from the nothing itself. And from it, they came. 12 ships, shaped like crescents and wings of living ivory. HULLs pulsed with organic light. Weapons glowed like stars dying in reverse. The lyani fleet. They moved with precision and purpose, flanking the Xeno ship in seconds. There were no shots fired. Just light. Pure, blinding, crackling light. The Xeno cruiser's weapon systems died. Their shields collapsed. And in that frozen moment of silence, a voice spoke directly into Manfred's mind. Calm, layered, resonant. Prepare to be boarded. You are under lyani protection. He turned to Jane. She didn't smile, but she didn't need to. Her presence flooded his thoughts. She had called them, not with technology. With her will. Her people had heard her, and they had come. The docking clamps hit with a metallic shudder that echoed through the hull like the final strike of a war drum. The Xenocorp battlecruiser, now powerless and cocooned in the coordinated grip of 12 lyani warships, hung paralyzed in space. Its once imposing silhouette dwarfed by the organic elegance of the fleet that surrounded it. Manfred stood on the threshold of the airlock, rifle slung across his back, jaw tight. Beside him, Jane stepped forward without hesitation. Her posture was strong despite the lingering burn wound. Her fur, though singed and unkempt, shimmered with a quiet dignity. She no longer looked like the caged beast chained to stone. She looked like someone who had remembered her name. The moment the lock hissed open, warm air flooded the transport, fragrant, humid, tinged with the smell of moss and ozone. And before them unfurled something wholly alien. The interior of the lyani flagship was alive. Literally. Arched corridors of translucent bone and luminescent tissue curved overhead like the inside of some massive breathing cathedral. Strange vines glowed with bioluminescence. Walls flexed and shifted organically with their movements. It was all engineered, of course, but not in the way Manfred understood engineering. This was grown, nurtured, summoned. A reception party waited. For lyani, armored not in metal but in bark-like woven plates, their movements graceful, their eyes bright with ancestral knowing. They didn't speak aloud. They didn't need to. A crystalline orb floated between them, pulsing softly with internal light. The moment it came within reach, the pulse shifted, and Manfred staggered slightly, language downloaded directly into his mind, bypassing sound altogether. Understanding crystallized in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. "You are safe," the orb said. "We have come for her, and for the truth." Manfred almost answered, but Jane raised her hand. Her mind spoke. Before her mouth did, "Not just for me. For us." The lyani nodded, slowly, respectfully, then turned and led them deeper into the ship. As they walked, Manfred saw other crew members watching them. Tall, elegant creatures with eyes like polished gemstones. They didn't leer, didn't gawk. They studied, measured, and nodded once in acknowledgement. Not of Jane. Of both of them. Soon they arrived at the heart of the vessel. The bridge. Not a command center, not in the human sense. It was a garden suspended in crystal. Trees arched into the ceiling. Soft moss blanketed the floor. And in the bay center stood a massive dais, ringed with floating glyphs and shifting constellations. At the dais stood a figure taller than the rest. His fur was deep indigo, streaked with silver. His shoulders bore the weight of command, but it was his eyes sharp, piercing mirrors of Jane's that held Manfred in place. Her father. Commander of the fleet. Leader of the lyani Exodarch Council. And he was staring directly at the human. Jane stepped forward. Her posture changed, straighter, more formal. And then, without words, she began. She projected everything. The chains, the hunters, the ridgeback, the fight, the flight, the data, the wound. But more than that, she shared the moment Manfred bled for her, the moment he smashed the lock, the moment he looked at her not as a monster, but as someone worth saving. The room shifted with the weight of that memory. The commander remained still, impassive. When she finished, he walked to Manfred. They stood face to face, predator and soldier, alien and man. The orb pulsed. "You did not have to save her," it translated. "No," Manfred replied. "I didn't." "And yet you did," Manfred shrugged. "Someone had to." The commander blinked slowly, then extended a hand. "Not as a warrior. As something else. As an equal. Manfred hesitated only a moment before shaking it. Behind him, lyani techs moved to the control center. They had begun to decrypt the xenologs fully. Holograms of DNA strands, weapon schematics, neural imprint primes flickered around the chamber. And then, without warning, the orb pulsed red. Incoming encrypted transmission. Origin, Port Anarchy. Manfred stiffened. Jane's ears twitched. The screen lit up. A grainy, static warped face filled the space. Wex. The broker. "Manfred," he said, his voice oily and rushed. "Bad news, buddy. You've been burned. The bounty's out. Xeno wants the girl and the data. And you?" "They want you vaporized." Manfred narrowed his eyes. "How wide?" "Sector-wide. Consortium's got it. Every backwater port from here to the rim." Jane turned to the commander. Nodded. The orb pulsed again. "You are no longer safe. You are now targets," Manfred sighed. "No change there." The commander paced slowly, then stopped in front of them again. "Xeno will not stop," the orb translated. "They have seen her power. They will come." Again, Jane stepped forward. Her voice rang clear in both sound and mind. "Then we stop hiding." The commander tilted his head. Thoughtful? Calculating. Then he turned to Manfred. "You know the systems, the syndicates, the politics. We do not. We need someone who understands their chaos. Someone who can speak for us." Manfred's stomach dropped. "You're kidding." The commander didn't blink. Double quotes. "No. You want me to be your ambassador?" "You already are." The orb pulsed. Jane stepped beside him. Not behind. Beside. Double quotes. "We don't need a diplomat," she said. "We need a fighter. one who knows how to survive in the dark. Manfred looked around, at the crystal, the peace, the brilliance of a civilization untouched by greed. Then back at Jane. Her eyes said, everything. Her voice didn single quotes t. Stay, fight, build something new. Manfred inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower. Fine, he muttered, but I'm gonna need a better ship. The stargazer slipped through the black like a blade through silk. It was no longer a stolen transport with burn scars and jury-rigged systems. It was a lyani scout vessel, reborn in bioforged elegance. Her hull shimmered with a pearl-toned sheen that flexed under starlight, her engines pulsing with quiet, organic rhythm, grown, not built, alive, not assembled. On the bridge, Manfred stood in silence. 6 months had passed since that first contact. 6 months since he had traded salvage for diplomacy, isolation for duty, and survival for something far more dangerous, hope. He didn't wear a uniform. Not exactly. What draped his shoulders was part armor, part regalia woven with the organic weave of lyani fibers, but shaped to reflect his human sensibilities. Utility belts, holsters, layered coats. But the color deep midnight blue with silver stitching matched the commander's own. It was no accident. He was no longer a guest. He was their voice in the outer worlds. Beside him, Jane adjusted the stargazer's trajectory with a fluid touch on the console. Her fingers glided over the light-etched controls like a musician shaping a song. Her posture was calm, but her eyes flicked with hidden intensity. She was both pilot and protector, advisor and partner. No longer specimen L. No longer a weapon. She was Commander Second Class of the lyani Forward Fleet, and bonded to the first human ambassador in history. They had no word for what they were to each other, not in her language, nor in his, but it didn't matter. Silence between them said everything. Ahead, the Cygnus arm loomed, the boundary line of neutral space. It was a corridor filled with pirates, traders, blacksite labs, and frontier colonies choking on corporate ash. The perfect place for first contact. Or the perfect place to die. Manfred stared at the swirling chaos ahead. How many listening? Post did you ping? He asked. Jane's ears flicked. 38. And how many responded? 1, Manfred exhaled. Better than I expected. It's a trap, Jane added, dryly. Of course it's a trap, he replied. Deadpan. Their mission was simple in design, impossibly complex in execution. Deliver evidence of Xenocorp's illegal Apex program to the Galactic Consortium. Expose their atrocities. And make the case that the lyani, long hidden, were ready to enter the galactic stage. But the truth was heavier than any data file. Xeno wasn't just engineering beasts. They were resurrecting something older, something buried in Jane's genes, something neither of them had fully understood until now. A signal chimed. Manfred brought up the message. Text only. Dock at Terminal 4. Come alone, unarmed. He looked at Jane. She raised one brow. They don't know you very well. Apparently. Not. They prepared the shuttle together, stripped weapons down, concealed what they could. The stargazer remained cloaked in orbit, its systems in standby. If anything went wrong, it would drop out of hiding like a predator from the clouds. As they descended to the port's landing ring, the world below came into view, a half-terraformed rock wrapped in orbital junk and corporate sprawl. Turrets, billboards, black ice vendors, hired muscle patrolling every platform. The air was thick with danger, and something worse. Manfred felt it. Before he saw it. A presence. A pulse in the air like psychic static. They were being watched. He disembarked. Alone, walked through scanners, past mercenaries and thugs pretending to be customs officials. His bootsteps echoed through the arrival deck. where half-dead androids begged for software updates and children sold black market spare parts like candy.a. Figure waited for him at the meeting point. Not a soldier. Scientist.drcaldrix. Head of Xeno's Apex program. She wore a lab coat lined with armored mesh and smiled like she'd already won. Ambassador Manfred, she said, as if the title was a joke. How nice of you to come. I'm full of bad decisions, he said. Calmly. She gestured toward a bench. They sat across from each other, separated by a flickering security shield. You've caused a lot of trouble, she said. Lost assets, dead teams, crashed facilities. I'm not here to cause trouble, Manfred replied. I'm here to end it. He dropped the data chip onto the table. Every log, every genetic file. The Titan, the bait protocols. Everything you tried to hide. Caldrix didn't flinch. She smiled wider. Oh, I know, she said. And that's exactly why you won't leave this port alive. The lights died. The room pulsed red. Alarms screamed. And above, like a blade of thunder, the stargazer decloaked. In atmosphere. The biocannons bloomed from her hull, their tips glowing with unearthly energy. Outside the window, armored vehicles screeched across the tarmac, their gunners turning toward the sky, only to be shredded by focused surgical strikes. Of light, Manfred didn't move. You think I came alone? He asked. Caldrix single quotes S smirk cracked. Then the ceiling split. Jane dropped through in a whirl of claws and violet fury, her body a blur of motion, her mind already inside the heads of every guard within 50 meters. They didn't fight. They collapsed, dropping weapons, twitching, clutching their skulls as their senses fractured under her psychic strike. Caldrix tried to run. Manfred stopped her. She looked up at him from the floor, blood on her teeth. You have no idea what she is, she hissed. What's inside her? It's not just lyani. It's older. It's them. I know, Manfred said, his voice cold. I've seen it. And for the first time, she looked afraid. Jane stepped beside him, looked down at the woman who had once overseen her chains. You made a mistake, Jane said, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. You assumed I was alone. They left her in the hands of consortium agents along with the files, the evidence, and a recorded statement of Xeno's crimes. 3 weeks later, the trials began. The galaxy shifted, and the lyani emerged from shadow. *** on the bridge of the Stargazer, now sanctioned as an official envoy vessel, Manfred stood beside Jane as a new star map unfolded before them. It shimmered with untouched systems, hidden worlds, and paths no human had ever walked. A place for diplomacy. For truth. For war, if needed. Ready? She asked, her voice quiet in the quiet hum of the ship. He reached out, placed his hand over hers. Let's write a new map. The stars stretched out before them. The soldier, the beast, the bond. Not a rescue. Not a mission. A beginning.